P-E-A-K. As much as I appreciate Limbus, it sure is nice from time to time to take a break from the game. Surely, this will be a unique and fresh...
신뢰해줘서 고맙군. 엔드필드의 관리자.
관리자님! 관리자, 출발하자. 출발합니다!
I am Rossina Wolfberg Lupino, prima elite of the pack, future capo, and stronger of the dawn. Remember this well.
Alright. As an Arc-Bus Companyite player, it comes to no surprise that Endfield was definitely on my radar in terms of releases this year, and I am pleased to say that thanks to its smooth gameplay, eye-catching graphics, and the ability to live out my dream as a manufacturing plant owner, the game as a whole lives up to its hype. However, having a predecessor known for its very dense story, which presents a multitude of themes, ranging from the lack of support for people who have chronic diseases get, to being a civilian stuck in a war zone, all the way to breaking the boundaries that is our skies to reach a truth that lies beyond the stars. My reservations in terms of Enfield's story could be perceived as overly critical or harsh. After all, the expectations of the future are born from the achievements of the past, meaning it's only harsh because we place it against Arknights' very well written and developed story. So it would be remiss of me to crucify a game whose only sin is that it was a progeny of a great one in terms of its narrative. Before I begin, I would like to state that overall I am having fun with this game, and am slowly warming up to its world and setting. But that being said, I do have some words regarding its pacing, setting, and the general feeling it has, which unfortunately I have to admit that the story is a slow start that is not at all as intense or as immediately serious as its predecessor. That's not to say it has to be like Arknights, it's just that compared to Arknights, the setting and theme and pacing were a lot more engaging, especially during the midpoint of its first chapters. For example, take Arknights' opening. You are immediately thrusted into a war zone with clear definitions on who the enemies are, a group called Reunion. Engagement with some of their members are shown as desperate or extremely close-cutting. But at the same time, the game also reminds you that these are still people who are just opposed to you ideologically. In another life, perhaps, you could have been allies. The story constantly reminds you of the weight of taking their lives and how the ones who remain mourn their deaths. It's a good mix of aura farming, actual combat, and then characterization, where both sides do something and the other side reacts or feels to it. As opposed to Endfield, where enemies are so dehumanized they come off as generic Borderlands goons. The first two major bosses, for example, are Roadhog from Overwatch and the Moya emoji. Granted, in terms of aesthetics, the story does tell you they are just generic Borderlands goons, but the game also does constantly remind you that they are dangerous. However, most of the bosses and set pieces don't at all highlight the danger the story says you are in. The stakes don't feel as high, and fighting rocks and generic goons is not enough to make you care. That is, until you reach this point in the story.
조심해. 정말 멋진데? 부숴야 할 때 과감히 공격. 대지. 언제든지 갈 수 있어. 여기까지야. 끝이야.
The Marble Aglamoiral. This boss addresses the main issue I had with the game's story. It's a personal boss fight, the design it carries is more than just a generic goon or geometry, and also the lead up is very satisfying. Mortar shells going off around you, the UWST workers fighting for survival, and the Enfielders you helped before come in to return the favor. Lastly, the fact that the main villain actually gets involved instead of just looking at you from a perch helps establish an antagonistic bond between her and your character. You are no longer just fighting an enemy, you are fighting the enemy. Even after combat, the ramifications of the capabilities your opposition carries is clear. They have made a desperate situation into an unwinnable one, and even with every member of your team giving it their all, they still fall short, which results in your little buddy dying. It's a shame it's only for the last 30 minutes of the first chapter, considering how there was so much time spent building this up. However, I'm hopeful for future chapters, as having all the tutorials out of the way will allow the structuring of the next chapters to be more appropriately paced in terms of stakes and engagement. That being said, it is still a very good climax that sets up for future stories and actually gives you an interaction with the mysterious main villain. This and the Loreley's introduction basically carried the initial chapter on its back. Had it been any weaker or not as strong as these were, I would have been harsher in my critique. However, you should still give it a try, but be warned, the midpoint of the story is very slow. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to drink plenty of water.